today we are reading, oh, I forgot the title is Around the World in 80 Days, starting from chapter whatever this is. I still can't read Roman numerals. Yeah. Wait. Hold on. Or is it 8? Or is it 7? Okay, wait, hold on. I think it's 8. Okay, I think it's 8. So we are reading from chapter 8. In which there's something I cannot pronounce. What's this? In which Passepartout talks rather more perhaps than is prudent. Fix soon rejoined Passepartout, who was lounging and looking about on the quay, as if he did not feel that he, at least, was obliged to see anything. Well, my friend, said the detective, coming up with him, is your passport visaed? Ah, it's you, is it, Monsieur, responded Passepartout. Thanks, yes, the passport is all right. And you are looking about you? Yes, but we travel so fast that I seem to be journeying in a dream. So this is... Oh, I actually cannot pronounce this. Hold on, give me a sec. How do I pronounce that? Suez. Yes, but we are traveling so fast I seem to be journeying in a dream, so this is Suez. Yes, in Egypt, certainly in Egypt. And in Africa? In Africa. In Africa, repeated Passepartout. Just think, Monitor. Wait. Should probably figure out how to pronounce that too. Messiah. Messiah. I just call it Messiah. I really can't pronounce this. I can't pronounce this. Sorry, guys. I had no idea that we should go further than Paris. And all that I saw of Paris was between 20 minutes past 7 and 20 minutes before 9 in the morning.
Yes, that's perfect.
That's why I said the thing was small, and then...
Can I?
Yeah.
Because every time you start live, you will just reset.
Oh.
I will reset. Can I? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I had no idea that we should go farther than Paris, and all that I saw of Paris was between 20 minutes past 7 and 20 minutes before 9 in the morning, between the Northern and the Lions. I cannot pronounce that. So, Lion or Leon? Hold on. I'm just gonna try Leon. And I'm just gonna try Leon. Leon. Oh, what is it? Yeah, here. Leon stations through the windows of the car, and in a driving rain. How I regret not having seen once more. Oh, I'm gonna butcher this. Perela Chai and the circus in the Champs Elysees. Okay, I think 100% pronouncing that wrongly. Um, I don't speak French. Yeah. You are in a great hurry, then. I am not, but my master is. By the way, I must buy some shoes and shirts. We came away without trunks, only with the carpet bag. I will show you an excellent shop for getting what you want. Really, monsieur, you are very kind. And they walked off together, Passe part out, chatting vol- volubly. Is that a word? I think that's a word. Volubly. Oh, it just means talk loudly. Okay. As they went along. Above all, said he, don't let me lose the steamer. You have plenty of time. It's only 12 o'clock. Passepartout pulled out his big watch. 12, he exclaimed. Why, it's only 8 minutes before 10. Your watch is slow. My watch, a family watch, monsieur, which has come down from my great-grandfather. It doesn't vary 5 minutes in the year. It's a perfect chronometer, look you. I see how it is, said Fix. You have kept London time, which is 2 hours behind that of Suez. You ought to regulate your watch at noon in each country. I regulate my watch? Never. Well then, it will not agree with the sun. So much worse for the sun, monsieur. The sun will be wrong, then. And the worthy fellow returned the watch to its fob with a defiant gesture. After a few minutes' silence, Fix resumed. You left London hastily, then? I rather think so. Last Friday, at 8 o'clock in the evening, Monsieur Fogg came home with his club, and 3/4 of an hour afterwards we were off. But where is your master going? Always straight ahead. He is going round the world. Round the world? Quite fixed. Yes, and in 80 days. He says it is on a wager, but, between us, are they better? Or lower? Or higher?
I think I am.
Lagging.
Oh, this is how when it looks different in the phone, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Well, then it looks good in your end now. It's just mine.
Interesting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Like that? Okay. Okay. Oh wait, where was I? Oh, round the world. Okay. Round the world, quite fixed. Yes, and in 80 days. He says it is on a wager, but between us, I don't believe a word of it. That wouldn't be common sense. There's something else in the wind. Ah, Mr. Fogg is a character, is he? I should say he was. Is he rich? No doubt, for he is carrying an enormous sum in brand new bank notes with him. And he doesn't spare the money on the way either. He has offered a large reward to the engineer of Mongolia if he gets us to Bombay well in advance of time. Have you known your master for a long time? Why, no, I entered this service the very day we left London. The effects of this replies upon the already suspicious and excited detective may be imagined. The hasty departure from London soon after the robbery, the large sum carried by Mr. Fogg, his eagerness to reach distant countries, the pretext of an eccentric and foolhardy bet, all confirmed Fix in his theory. He continued to pump poor Passepartout, who learned that he really knew little or nothing of his master, who lived a solitary existence in London, was said to be rich, though no one knew whence came his riches, and was mysterious and impenetrable in his affairs and habits. Fix felt sure that Phileas Fogg would not land at Suez, but was really going on to Bombay. But is Bombay far from here? Asked Passepartout. Pretty far. It's 10 days' voyage by sea. And in what country is Bombay? India. In Asia? Certainly. The deuce. I was going to tell you that one thing that worries me. My burner. What burner? My gas burner, which I forgot to turn off, and which is at this moment burning at my expense. I have calculated, monsieur, that I lose 2 shillings every 4 and 20 hours, exactly 6 pence more than I earn. And you will understand, the longer our journey, did Fix pay any attention to Passepartout's trouble about the gas? It is not probable. He was not listening, but was cogitating. Actually, can I pronounce that again? Hold on. Cogitating. Okay. Cogitating. Okay. So basically, wait, no. Okay. Basically, this means he's thinking. He's thinking very hard, yeah. Passepartout and he had now reached the shop, where Fix left his companion to make his purchases, and after recommending him not to miss the steamer, and hurried back to the consulate. Now that he was fully convinced, Fix had quite recovered his equanimity. Consul, said he, I have no longer any doubt. I have spotted my man. He passes himself off as an odd stick who is going round the world in 80 days. Then he's a sharp fellow, returned the consul, and counts on returning to London after putting the police of the 2 countries off his track. We'll see about that, replied Fix. But are you not mistaken? I am not mistaken. Why was this robber so anxious to prove by the visa that he had passed through Suez? Why? I have no idea, but listen to me. He reported, in a few words, the most important parts of his conversations with Passepartout. In short, appearances. Wait. In short, said the consul, appearances are wholly against this man. And what are you going to do? Send a dispatch to London for a warrant of arrest to be dispatched instantly to Bombay, take passage on board the Mongolia, follow my rogue to India, and there, on English ground, arrest him politely with my warrant in my hand and my hand on his shoulder. Having uttered these words with a cool, careless air, the detective took leave of the consul and repaired to the telegraph office, whence he sent the dispatch we have seen to the London police office. A quarter of an hour later found Fix, with a small bag in his hand, proceeding on board the Mongolia, and many moments longer, the noble steamer rode out at full steam upon the waters of the Red Sea. Chapter something. Can't read Roman numerals. In which the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean proved propitious to the designs of Phileas Fogg. The distance between Suez and Aden is precisely 1,310 miles, and the regulations of the company allow steamers 138 hours in which to traverse it. The Mongolia, thanks to the vigorous exertions of the engineer, seemed likely. So, open.
I forgot to give you this so you can view the comment.
Oh.
Because there's someone got someone asking questions.
Oh.
So
What book is this? Next page. Oh, no wonder I cannot read anything. Oh, okay, so I was being a bit dumb. The distance. Wait, I already read that. Where was I? Oh, here. The Mongolia, thanks to the vigorous exertions of the engineer, seemed likely, so rapid was her speed, to reach her destination considerably within that time. The greater part of the passengers from Brindisi were bound for India, some for Bombay, others for Calcutta by way of Bombay, the nearest route thither, and now that a railway now that a railway crosses the Indian peninsula. Among the passengers was a number of officials and military officers of various grades, the latter being attracted to the regular British forces or commanding the sepoy troops, receiving high salaries ever since the central government has assumed the powers of the Great East India of the East India Company. For the sub for the sub lieutenants, hold on, lieutenants, lieutenants, sub-lieutenants get £280, brigadiers £2,400, and generals of divisions £4,000. What with the military men, a number of rich young Englishmen on their travels, and the hospital efforts of the pursuer, the time passed quickly on the Mongolia. The best of fare was spread upon the cabin tables at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the 8 o'clock supper. And the ladies scrupulously changed their toilets twice a day, and the hours were whirled away when the sea was tranquil, with music, dancing, and games. But the Red Sea is full of caprice, and often boisterous, like most long and narrow gulfs. When the wind came from the African or Asian coast, the Mongolia, with a long hull, rolled fearfully. Then the ladies speedily disappeared below. The pianos were silent, singing and dancing suddenly ceased. Yet the good ship plowed straight on, unretarded by wind or wave, towards the straits of hold on. Bao ba wait. Bab el Mandeb Mahan et Ma Bab el Mandeb. Okay, basically it's just a strait. It's just the name of a strait. Yeah. What was Phileas Fogg doing all this time? It might be thought that, in his anxiety, he would be constantly watching the changes of the wind, the disorderly raging of the billows. Every chance, in short, which might force the Mongolia to slacken her speed and thus interrupt his journey. But, if he thought of these possibilities, he did not betray the fact by any outward sign. Always the same impassible member of the Reform Club, whom no incident should surprise, as unvarying as the ship's chronometers, and seldom having the curiosity even to go upon the deck, he passed through memorable scenes of the Red Sea with cold indifference, and did not care to recognize the historic towns and villages which, along its borders, raised their picturesque outlines against the sky, and betrayed no fear of the dangers of the Arabic Gulf, which the old historians always spoke of with horror, and upon which with, and upon which the ancient navigators never ventured without propagating the gods by ample sacrifices. How did this eccentric person wait, how did this eccentric person age? Eh? Personage? Hold on. Personage. Okay. How did this eccentric personage pass his time on the Mongolia? He made his 4 hearty meals every day, regardless of the most persistent rolling and pitching on the part of the steamer. He played whilst defatigab- he played whilst indefatigably, for he had found partners and as enthusiastic in the game as himself. A tax collector, on the way to his post at Goa, the Rev. Dem Kim. Why are all their names so hard to pronounce? Oh my god. Decimus Smith, returning to his parish at Bombay, and a brigadier general of the English army, who was about to rejoin his brigade at Benares, made up the party, and with Mr. Fogg, played wise by the hour together in absorbing silence. As for Passepartout, he too had escaped seasickness and took his meals conscientiously in the forward cabin. He rather enjoyed the voyage, for he was well fed and well lodged, took a great interest in the scenes through which they were passing, and consoled himself with the delusion that his master's whim would end at Bombay. He was pleased, on the day after leaving Suez, to find on deck the obliging person with whom he had walked and chatted on the quays. "If I am not mistaken," said he, approaching this person, with his almost amiable smile, "you are the gentleman who so kindly volunteered to guide me at Suez? Ah, I quite recognize you. You are the servant of the strange Englishman. Just so, Monsieur Fix." "Monsieur Fix," resumed Passepartout, "I'm charmed to find you on board. Where are you bound?" "Like you, to Bombay." "That's capital. Have you made this trip before?" "Several times. I am one of the agents of the Peninsular Company." "Then you know India?" "Why, yes," replied Fix, who spoke cautiously. A curious place, this India." "Oh, very curious. Mosquitoes, minarets, temples, fakris, pagodas, tigers, snakes, elephants. I hope you will have ample time to see the sights." "I hope so, Monsieur Fix. You see, a man of sound sense ought not to spend his life jumping from a steamer upon a railway train, and from a railway train upon a steamer again, pretending to make the tour of the world in 80 days. No, all this gymnastics, you may be sure, will cease at Bombay." "And Mr. Fogg is getting on well?" asked Fix, in the most natural tone in the world. "Quite well, and I, too. I eat like a famished ogre. It's the sea air. But I've never seen your master on deck. Never. He hasn't the least curiosity. Do you know, Mr. Passepartout, that this pretended tour in 80 days may conceal some secret errand? Perhaps a diplomatic mission?" "Faith, Monsieur Fix, I assure you I know nothing about it, nor would I give half a crown to find out." After this meeting, Passepartout and Fix got into the habit of chatting together, the latter making it a point to gain the worthy man's confidence. He frequently offered him a glass of whisky or pale ale in the steamer bar room, which Passepartout never failed to accept with grateful alacrity, with grateful alacrity, mentally pronouncing Fix the best of good fellows. Meanwhile, the Mongolia was pushing forward rapidly. On the 13th, Mocha, surrounded by its ruined walls whereon date trees were growing, was sighted, and on the mountains beyond were espied vast coffee fields. Passepartout was ravished to behold this celebrated place, and thought that, with its circular walls and dismantled fort, it might look like an immense coffee cup and saucer. The following night they passed through the Straits of Bab el Mandeb, which means in Arabic the Bridge of Tears, and the next day they put in at Steamer Point, northwest of Aden harbour, to take in coal. This matter of fueling steamers is a serious one at such distance from the coal mines. It cost the Peninsular Company some 800,000 pounds a year. In these distant seas, coal is worth 3 or 4 pounds sterling a ton. The Mongolia had still 1,650 miles to traverse before reaching Bombay, and was obliged to remain 4 hours at Steamer Point to coal up. But this delay, as it was foreseen, did not affect Phileas Fogg's program. Besides, the Mongolia, instead of reaching Aden on the morning of the 15th, when she was due, arrived there on the evening of the 14th, a gain of 15 hours. Mr. Fogg and his servant went ashore at Aden to have their passport again visaed. Fix, unobserved, followed them. The visa procured, Mr. Fogg returned on board to resume his former habits, but Passepartout, according to customs, sauntered among the mixed population of Somalis, Banyans, Parsis, Jews, Arabs, and Europeans who comprised the 25,000 inhabitants of Aden. He gazed with wonder upon the fortifications which makes this place the Gibraltar of the Indian Ocean, and with the vast cisterns where the English engineers were still at work, 2,000 years after the engineers of Solomon. Very curious, said Passepartout to himself, on returning to the steamer. I see that it is by no means useless to travel if a man wants to see something new. At 6 p.m., the Mongolia slowly moved out of the roadstead and was soon once more on the Indian Ocean. She had 168 hours in which to reach Bombay, and the sea was favorable, the wind being in the northwest and all sails aiding the engine. The steamer rowed but little. The ladies, in fresh toilets, reappeared on deck, and the singing and dancing were resumed. The trip was being accomplished most successfully, and Passepartout was enchanted with the congenial companion which chance had secured him in the person of the delightful Fix. On Sunday, October 20th, towards noon, they came in sight of the Indian coast. 2 hours later, the pilot came on board. A range of hills lay against the sky in the horizon, and soon the rows of palms which adorned Bombay came distinctly into view. The steamer entered the road formed by the islands in the bay, and 4:30 she hauled up at the quays of Bombay. Phileas Fogg was in the act of finishing the 33rd rubber of the voyage, and his partner himself having, by a bold stroke, captured all 13 of the tricks, concluded this fine campaign was with a brilliant victory. Mongolia was due at Bombay on the 22nd. She arrived on the 20th. This was a gain to Phileas Fogg of 2 days since his departure from London, and he calmly entered the fact in the itinerary in the column of gains. Chapter something, I think that's 10. Okay, I think that's chapter 10. In which Passepartout is only too glad to get off with the loss of his shoes. Everybody knows that the Great Reverse Triangle of land, with its base in the north and its apex in the south, which is called India, embraces 1,400,000 square miles, upon which is spread unequally a population of 180 million souls. The British Crown exercises a real and despotic dominion over the larger portion of this vast country, and as a Governor-General stationed at Calcutta, governors of Madras, Bombay, and in Bengal, and a Lieutenant Governor at Agra. But British India, properly so called, only embraces 700,000 square miles and a population of from 100 to 110 millions of inhabitants. A considerable portion of India is still free from British authority. There are certain ferocious Rajas in the interior who are absolutely dependent. The celebrated East India Company was all-powerful from 1756, when the English first gained a foothold on the spot where now stands the city of Madras, down to the time of the Great Sepoy Insurrection. It gradually annexed province after province, purchasing them of their native chiefs, whom it seldom paid, and appointed the Governor General of his subordinates, civil and military. But the East India Company, but the East India Company has now passed away, leaving the British possessions in India directly under the control of the Crown. The aspect of the country, as well as the manners and distinctions of race, is daily changing. Formerly, one was obliged to travel in India by the old cumbrous methods of going on foot or on horseback, in palanquins or unwieldy coaches. Now, fast steamboat, fast steamboats ply. Okay, wait, hold on. Oh, okay. So, um, ply in this context is basically saying that a vehicle or a ship or whatever or a vessel that travels regularly over a route, typically for commercial purposes. Basically just telling you that basically just travel lah. Yeah, travel, but specifically for commercial. I can't spell commercial purposes. Yeah, on the Indus and the Ganges, and a great railway with branch lines joining the main line at many points on its route traverses the peninsula from Bombay to Calcutta in 3 days. This railway does not run in a direct line across India. The distance between Bombay and Calcutta, as the bird flies, is only from 1,000 to 1,100 miles. But the deflections of the road increase this distance by more than a third. The general route of the Great Indian Peninsula Railway is as follows. Leaving Bombay, it passes through Calcutta, crossing to the continent opposite Tana, goes over the chain of the Western Ghats, runs thence northeast as far as Burhanpur, skirts the nearly independent territory of Bundelkhand, ascends to Allahabad, then eastwardly, meeting the Ganges at Benares, then departs from the river a little, and descending southeastward by Burdivan and the French town of Chandernagore, has its terminus at Calcutta. The passengers of the Mongolia went ashore at 4:30 p.m. and at exactly 8, the train would start from Calcutta. Mr. Fogg, after bidding goodbye to his whist partners, left the steamer, gave his servant several errands to do, urged it upon him to be at the station promptly at 8, and, with his regular step, which beat to the second, like an astronomical clock, directed his steps to the passport office. As for the wonders of Bombay and its famous city hall, its splendid library, its forts and docks, its bazaars, mosques, synagogues, its Armenian churches, and the noble pagoda on Malabar Hill, with its two polygonal towers. He cared not a straw to see them. He would not deign to examine even the masterpieces of Elephantana, or the mysterious hypogea concealed southeast from the docks, or those fine remnants of Buddhist architecture, the Canhevian grottos of the island of Salcete. Having transacted his business at the passport office, Phileas Fogg suddenly repaired quietly to the railway station, where he ordered dinner. Among the dishes served up to him, the landlord especially recommended a certain giblet of native rabbit, on which he prided himself. Mr. Fogg accordingly tasted the dish, but, despite its spice sauce, found it far from palatable. He rang for the landlord on his appearance, said, fixing his clear eyes upon him, "Is this rabbit, sir?" "Yes, my lord," the rogue boldly replied, "rabbit from the jungles." "And this rabbit did not mew when he was killed?" "Mew, my lord? What, a rabbit mew, I swear to you." "Be so good, landlord, as not to swear, but remember this. Cats were formerly considered in India as sacred animals. That was a good time." "For the cats, my lord? Perhaps for the travellers as well." After which Mr. Fogg quietly continued his dinner. Fix had gone on shore shortly after Mr. Fogg, and his first destination was the headquarters of the Bombay Police. He made himself known as a London detective, told his business at Bombay, and the position of affairs relative to the supposed robber, and nervously asked if a warrant had arrived from London. It had not reached the office indeed. It had not reached the office. Indeed, there had not yet been time for it to arrive. Fix was sorely disappointed, and tried to obtain an order of arrest from the director of the Bombay Police. This the director refused, as the matter concerned the London office, which alone could legally deliver the warrant. Fix did not insist, and was fain to resign himself to await the arrival of the important document. But he was determined not to lose sight of the mysterious rogue as long as he stayed in Bombay. He did not doubt for a moment, any more than Passepartout, that Phileas Fogg would remain there, at least until it was time for the warrant to arrive. Passepartout, however, had no sooner heard his master's orders on leaving the Mongolia than he saw at once that they were to leave Bombay as they had done Suez and Paris, and that the journey would extend at least as far as Calcutta, and perhaps beyond that place. He began to ask himself if this bet that Mr. Fogg talked about was not really in good earnest, and whether his fate was not in truth forcing him, despite his love of repose, around the world in 80 days. Having purchased the usual quota of shirts and shoes, he took a leisurely promenade around the streets, where crowds of people of many nationalities, Europeans, Persians with pointed caps, Banyas with rounded turbans, Sinders, Sinders with square bonnets, Parsis with bagged mitres, and long-robed Armenians were collected. It happened to be the day of a Parsi festival. These descendants of the sect of Zoroaster, the most thrifty, civilized, intelligent, and austerer of the East Indians, among whom are counted the richest native merchants of Bombay, were celebrating a sort of religious carnival with processions and shows, in the midst of which Indian dancing girls, clothed in rose-coloured gauze, looped up with gold and silver, danced airily, but with perfect modesty, to the sound of viols and the clanging of tambourines. It is needless to say that Passepartout watched these curious ceremonies with staring eyes and a gaping mouth, that his countenance was that of the greenest ruby imaginable. Unhappily for his master, as well as himself, his curiosity drew him unconsciously further off than he had intended to go. At last, having seen the Parsi carnival wind away in the distance, he was turning his steps towards the station when he happened to espy the splendid pagoda on Malabar Hill, and was seized with the irresistible desire to see its interior. He was quite ignorant that it is forbidden to Christians to not enter certain Indian temples, and even the faithful must not go in without first leaving their shoes outside the door. It may be said here that the wise policy of the British government severely punishes a disregard of the practices of native religions. Passepartout, however, thinking no harm, went in like a simple tourist, and was soon lost in the admiration of the splendid Bahamian ornamentation which everywhere met his eyes, and when all of a sudden he found himself sprawling on the sacred flagging. He looked up to behold three enraged priests, who forthwith fell upon him, tore off his shoes, and began to beat him with loud, savage exclamations. The agile Frenchman was soon upon his feet again, and lost no time in knocking down two of his long-gowned adversaries with his fists and a vigorous application of his toes. Then, running out of the pagoda as fast as his legs would carry him, he soon escaped the third priest by mingling with the crowd in the streets. At 5 minutes before 8, Passepartout, hatless, shoeless, and having in the squabble lost his package of shirts and shoes, rushed breathlessly into the station. Fix, who had followed Mr. Fogg into the station and saw that he was really going to leave Bombay, was there, upon the platform. He had so resolved to follow the supposed robber to Calcutta, and further, if necessary. Passepartout did not observe the detective, who stood in an obscure corner, and Fix heard him relate his adventures in a few words to Mr. Fogg. "I hope that this will not happen again," said Phileas Fogg coldly as he got onto the train. Poor Passepartout, quite crestfallen, followed his master without a word. Fix was on the point of entering another carriage when an idea struck him which induced him to alter his plan. "No, I'll stay," said he. "An offence has been committed on Indian soil. I got my man." Just then, the locomotive gave a sharp screech, and the train passed out into the darkness of the night. Oh, crazy mofo, wow, isn't teaching oral, right? Um, like in-house lessons we teach oral. We do have some oral lessons. But if we're talking about live streams, then I'm not too sure. I have to check the schedule again. But definitely in-house lessons, yeah, we do teach oral. English oral. Chapter something. In which Phileas Fogg secures a curious means of conveyance at a fabulous price. Sorry, give me a sec. The train had started punctually. Among the passengers were a number of officers, government officials, and opium and indigo merchants, whose business called them to the eastern coast. Passepartout rode in the same carriage with his master, and a third passenger occupied a seat opposite to them. This was Sir Francis Cromarty, one of Mr. Fogg's whist partners on the Mongolia, now on his way to join his corps at the Benares. Sir Francis was a tall, fair man of 50 who had greatly distinguished himself in the last Sepoy revolt. He made India his home, only paying brief visits to England at rare intervals, and was almost as familiar as a native with the customs, history, and character of India and its people. But Phileas Fogg, who was not travelling but only describing a circumference, took no pains to inquire into these subjects. He was a solid body, traversing an orbit around the terrestrial globe, according to the laws of rational mechanics. He was at this moment calculating in his mind the number of hours spent since his departure from London, and, had it been in his nature to make a useless demonstration, would have rubbed his hands for satisfaction. Sir St. Francis Cromarty had observed the oddity of his travelling companion, although the only opportunity he had for studying him had been while he was dealing the cards and between two rubbers, and questioned himself whether a human heart really beat beneath this cold exterior, and whether Phileas Fogg had any sense of the beauties of nature. The Brigadier General was free to mentally confess that, Of all the eccentric persons he had ever met, none was comparable to this product of the exact sciences. Phileas Fogg had not concealed from Sir Francis his design of going round the world, nor the circumstances under which he set out. And the general only saw in the wager a useless eccentricity and a lack of sound common sense. In this way, this strange gentleman was going on. He would leave the world without having done any good to himself or anyone else. An hour after leaving Bombay, the train had passed the viaducts and the island of South Kete and had got into the open country. At Khao they reached the junction of the branch line which descends towards southeastern India by Kandala and Pune. In passing Powell, they entered the defiles of the mountains with their basalt bases and their summits crowded with thick and verdant forests. Phileas Fogg and Sir Francis Cromarty exchanged a few words from time to time, and now Sir Francis, reviving the conversation, observed, "Some years ago, Mr. Fogg, you would have met with a delay at this point which would have lost you your wager." "How so, Sir Francis?" "Because the railway stopped at the base of these mountains, which the passengers were obliged to cross in palanquins or on ponies to Kandala, on the other side." "Such a delay would not have deranged my plans in the least," said Mr. Fogg. "I have constantly foreseen the likelihood of certain obstacles." "But, Mr. Fogg," pursued Sir Francis, "you run the risk of having some difficulty about this these fellows' adventure at the pagoda." Passepartout, his feet comfortably wrapped in his travelling blanket, was sound asleep, and did not dream that anybody was talking about him. "The government is very severe upon that kind of offence. It takes particular care that the religious customs of the Indians should be respected, and if your servant were caught—" "Very well, Sir Francis," replied Mr. Fogg. "If he had been caught, he would have been condemned and punished, and then would have quietly returned to Europe. I don't see how this affair could have delayed his master." The conversation fell again. During the night, the train left the mountains behind, and passed Nasik, and the next day proceeded over the flat, well-cultivated country of Kahan, Ka, Kahandish, with its straggling villages, above which rose the minarets of the pagodas. This fertile territory is watered by numerous small rivers and limpid streams, mostly tributaries of the Godavari. Passepartout, on walking and looking out, could not realize that he was actually crossing India in a railway train. The locomotive, guided by an English engineer and fed with English coal, threw out its smoke upon cotton, coffee, nutmeg, clove, and pepper plantations, while the steam curled in spirals around groups of palm trees, in the midst of which were seen picturesque bungalows, vihares, sort of abandoned monasteries, and marvelous temples enriched by the exhaustless ornamentation of Indian architecture. Then they came upon vast tracts, extending to the horizon, with jungles inhabited by snakes and tigers, which fled at the noise of the train, succeeded by forests penetrated by the railway, and the still haunted elephants, which, with pensive eyes, gazed at the train as it passed. The travellers crossed, beyond Milligram, the fatal country so often stained with blood by the secretaries of the goddess Kali. Not far off rose Ellora, with its graceful pagodas, and the famous Aurungabad, capital of the ferocious Aurangzeb, now the chief town of one of the detached provinces of the kingdom of Nizam. It was thereabouts that Farinha the Thuggee chief, king of the stranglers, held his way. These ruffians, united by a secret bond, strangled victims of every age in honor of the goddess Death, without ever shedding blood. There was a period where this part of the country could scarcely be travelled over without corpses being found in every direction. The English government had succeeded in greatly diminishing these murders, though the Thuggees still exist and pursue the exercise of their horrible rights. At 12:30, the train stopped at Berhampur, where Pasir Padak was able to purchase some Indian slippers ornamented with fake pearls, in which, with evident vanity, he proceeds to encase his feet. The travellers made a hasty breakfast, for a little banks of their small. No, I mean the wrong line. sorry, I read the wrong line. The travellers made a hasty breakfast and started off for Esgiffer. After skirting for a little the banks of the small river Tapti, which empties into the Gulf of the Cambrai near Surat. Pasir Padak was now plunged into absorbing reverie. Up to his arrival at Bombay, he had entertained hopes that their journey would end there. But now that they were plainly whirling across India at full speed, a sudden change had come over him in the spirit of his dreams. His old vagabond nature returned to him. The fantastic ideas of his youth once more took possession of him. He came to regard his master's project as intended in good earnest, believed in the reality of the bet, and therefore in the tour of the world and the necessity of making it without fail within the designated 80 days. Without fail within the designated period. Already he began to worry about possible delays and accidents which might happen along the way. He recognized himself as being personally interested in the wager, and trembled at the thought that he might have been the means of losing it by his unpardonable folly of the night before. Being much less cool-headed than Mr. Fogg, he was much more restless, counting and recounting the days passed over, uttering maledictions when the train stopped, and accusing it of sluggishness, and mentally blaming Mr. Fogg for not having bribed the engineer. The worthy fellow was ignorant that, while it was possible by such means to hasten the rate of a steamer, it could not be done on the railway. The train entered the defiles of the Sudpur Mountains, which separate the Khandish from the Bundelkhand towards evening. Oh, give me a second. Okay. The next day, Sir Francis Cromarty asked Pasir Padak what time it was, to which, on consulting his watch, he replied that it was 3 in the morning. This famous timepiece, always regulated on the Greenwich meridian, which was now some 77 degrees westward, was at least 4 hours slow. Sir Francis corrected Pasir Padak's time, whereupon the latter made the same remark he had done to Fix, and upon the general insisting that the watch was going to be regulated in each new meridian, that the watch should be regulated in each new meridian, since he was constantly going eastward, that is, in the face of the sun, and therefore the days were shorter by 4 minutes for some degree gone over. Pasir Padak obstinately refused to alter his watch, which he kept at London time. It was an innocent delusion which could harm no one. Okay, so this bad spelling. Sorry, bad handwriting, no spelling. Obstinately is just like stubborn. The general at once stepped out, while Phileas Fogg calmly followed him, and they proceeded together to the conductor. "Why are we here?" asked Sir Francis. "At home? Not at home. At the hamlet? At the hamlet of Colby. Do we stop here?" "Certainly. The railway isn't finished." "What? Not finished?" "No, there's still a matter of 50 miles to be laid from here to Allahabad, where the lines begin." "But the papers announced the opening of the railway throughout. What would you have, officer?" "The papers were mistaken." "Yet you sell tickets from Bombay to Calcutta," retorted Sir Francis, who was growing warm. "No doubt," said the conductor, "but the passengers know that they must provide means of transportation for themselves from Kobe to Allahabad." Sir Francis was furious. Passer Part would daringly no, yeah. Passer Part would willingly have knocked the conductor down, but did not dare to look at his master. "Sir Francis," said Mr. Fogg quietly, "you will, if you please, look for some reasons about everyone in Allahabad. No, Fogg, this is Mr. Fogg. This is clearly greatly to your disadvantage." "No, Sir Francis, it was forgiven." "What? I knew you said the same way." "No, but I knew that some obstacle or other would sooner or later arise on my route. Nothing therefore is lost. I have 2 days, which I have already gained, to sacrifice. A steamer leaves Calcutta for Hong Kong at noon on the 25th. This is the 22nd, and we shall reach Calcutta in time." Alright, let me drink water. Give me a sec. There was nothing to say to so confident a response. Oh, verify to confirm? Okay, wait, give me a sec. Can you verify that I'm alive, apparently? Okay. There's nothing to say to so confident a response. But it was too true that the railway came to a termination at this point. The papers were like some watches, which have a way of getting too fast, and had been premature in their announcement of the completion of the line. The greater part of the travellers were aware of this interruption, and leaving the train, they began to engage such vehicles, as the village could only provide four-wheeled what is that? Pa palki Pakigaris, wagons drawn by zebus, carriages that looked like perambulating pagodas, palanquins, ponies, and whatnot. Mr. Fogg and Sir Francis Cromarty, after searching the village from end to end, came back without having found anything. "I shall go afoot," said Phileas Fogg. Passepartout, who had now rejoined his master, made away grimace, as he thought of his magnificent but too frail Indian shoes. Happy he had been looking out for him, and, after a moment's hesitation, said, "Monsieur, I think I have found a means of conveyance." "What?" "An elephant. An elephant that belongs to an Indian who lives but 100 steps from here." "Let's go and see the elephant," replied Mr. Fogg. They soon reached a small hut, near which, enclosed within some high palings, was the animal in question. An Indian came out of the hut, and, at their request, conducted them within the enclosure. The elephant, which its owner had reared, not for a beast of burden, but for warlike purposes, was half domesticated. Hold on, I feel like I need to sneeze. Okay. The Indian had begun already by often irritating him and feeding him every 3 months on sugar and butter to impart him a ferocity not in his nature. This method often being employed by those who train the Indian elephants for battle. Happily, however, for Mr. Fogg, the elephant's instruction in this direction had not gone far, and the elephant still preserved his natural gentleness. Keone, this was the name of the beast, could doubtless travel rapidly for a long time, and in default of any other means of conveyance, Mr. Fogg resolved to hire him. But elephants are far from cheap in India, where they are becoming scarce. The males, which alone are suitable for circus shows, are much sought, especially as but few of them are domesticated. When therefore Mr. Fogg persisted. Proposed to the Indian to hire Keone. He refused point blank. Mr. Fogg persisted, offering the excessive sum of £10 an hour for the loan of the beast to Allahabad. Refused. £20? Refused also. £40? Still refused. Passepartout jumped at each advance, but the Indian declined to be tempted. Yet the offer was an alluring one, for supposing it took the elephant 15 hours to reach Allahabad, his owner will release no less than £600 sterling. Phineas Fogg, without getting in the least flurried, then proposed to purchase the animal outright, and at first offered £1,000 for him. The Indians, perhaps thinking he was going to make a great bargain, still refused. Sir Francis Cromarty took Mr. Fogg aside and begged him to reflect before he went on any further, to which that gentleman replied that he was not in the habit of acting rashly, and that a bet of £20,000 was at stake, that the elephant was absolutely necessary to him, and that he would secure him if he had to pay 20 times its value. Returning to the Indian, whose small sharp eyes, glistening with avarice, betrayed that with him it was only a question of how great a price he could obtain. Mr. Fogg offered first 1200,000, then 1500, then 1800, 2000 pounds. Passepartout, usually so rubicund, was fairly white with surprise. At 2,000 pounds, the Indian yielded. What a price, good heavens! Cried Passepartout. For an elephant. It was only reminded now to find a guide. It only remained now to find a guide, which was comparatively easy. A young Parsi with an intelligent face offered his services, which Mr. Fogg accepted, promising so a generous reward as to materially stimulate his zeal. The elephant was led out and equipped. The Parsi, who was an accomplished elephant driver, covered his back with a sort of saddle cloth, and attached to each of his flanks some curiously uncomfortable howdahs. Phileas Fogg paid the Indian with some banknotes which he extracted from the famous carpet bag, a proceeding that seems to deprive poor Passepartout of its vitals. Then he offered to carry Sir Francis to Allahabad, which the brigadier gratefully accepted. As one traveller, the more would not be likely to fatigue the gigantic beast. Provisions were purchased at Colby, and while Sir Francis and Mr. Fogg took the howdahs on either side, Passepartout got astride the saddle cloth between them. The Parsi perched himself on the elephant's neck, and at 9 o'clock they set out from the village, the animal marching through the dense forest of palms by the shortest cut. Chapter 12? I think it's 12. In which Phileas Fogg and his companions venture across the Indian forest. And what ensued? Happened. I think, okay. In order to shorten the journey, the guide passed to the left of the line where the railway was still in process of being built. This line, owing to the capricious turnings of the Vindhya Mountains, did not pursue a straight course. The Parsi, who was quite familiar with the roads and paths in the district, declared that they would gain 20 miles by striking directly through the forest. Phileas Fogg and Sir Francis Cromarty plunged to the neck in the particular howdah provided for them, were horribly jostled by the swift trotting of the elephant, spurred on as he was by the skilful Parsi. But they endured the discomfort with true British phlegm, taking talking a little, and scarcely able to catch a glimpse of each other. As for Passepartout, who was mounted on the beast's back, and received the direct force of each concussion as he trod along, he was very careful, in accordance with his master's advice, to keep his tongue from between his teeth, as it would otherwise have been bitten off short. The worthy fellow bounced from the elephant's neck to his rump and vaulted like a clown on a springboard. Yet he laughed in the middle of his bouncing, and from time to time left from time to time took a piece of sugar out of his pocket and inserted it in Koyuni's trunk, who received it without in the least slackening his regular trot. After 2 hours, the guide stopped the elephant and gave him an hour for rest, during which the Koi Kyoini, after quenching his thirst at a neighbouring spring, set to devouring the branches and shrubs around him. Neither Sir Francis nor Mr. Fogg retired that day, and they both descended with the feeling of release. "Why, he's made out of iron!" exclaimed the general, gazing at admiringly on Kyoini. "Of forged iron," replied Passepartout, as he set as, as he set about preparing a hasty breakfast. At noon, the Parsi gave the signal of departure. The country soon presented a very savage aspect. Copses of dates and dwarf palms succeeded the dense forest. Then, vast, dry plains, dotted with scanty shrubs, and sown with great blocks of cyanide, hold on. Oh, it's a rock. It is just a rock. Just a grey rock. All this portion of Bundelkhand, which is little frequented by travellers, is inhabited by a fanatical population, hardened in the most horrible practices of the Hindu faith. The English has not been able to secure complete dominion over this territory, which is subject to the influence of Rajas, whom it is almost impossible to reach in their inaccessible mountain fastnesses. Yeah. The travelers several times saw bands of ferocious Indians who, when they perceived the elephant striding across country, made and made angry, arid, threatening motions. The Parsi avoided them as much as possible. Few animals were observed on the route. Even the monkeys hurried from their path with contortions and grimaces which convulsed con- convulsed Passepartout with laughter. In the midst of his gaiety, however, one thought troubled troubled the worthy servant. What would Mr. Fogg do with the elephant when he got to Allahabad? Would he carry him on with him? Impossible. The cost of transporting him would make him ruinously expensive. Would he sell him or set him free? The estimable beast certainly deserves some consideration. Should Mr. Fogg choose to make him, Passepartout, a present of Kyoini, he would be very much embarrassed. And those thoughts did not cease worrying him for a long while. The principal chain of the Vintias was crossed by 8 in the evening, and another halt was made on the northern slope in a ruined bungalow. They had gone nearly 25 miles that day, and an equal distance still separated them from the station of Allahabad. The night was cold. The Parsi lit a fire in the bungalow with a few dry branches, and the warmth was very grateful. Provisions purchased at Kobe sufficed for supper, and the travellers ate rev- ravenously. Ravenously. Basically, they were very hungry, that's why they ate. The conversation, beginning with a few disconnected phrases, soon gave place to loud and steady snores. The guide watched Kyoini, who slept standing, bolstering himself against the trunk of a large tree. Nothing occurred during the night to disturb the slumberers, although occasional growls front panthers and chatterings of monkeys broke the silence. The more formidable beasts made no cries or hostile demonstrations against the occupants of the bungalow. Sir Francis slept heavily, like an honest soldier overcome with fatigue. Passepartout was wrapped in uneasy dreams of the bouncing of the day before. As for Mr. Fogg, he slumbered as peacefully if he had been in his serene mansion in Savile Row. The journey was resumed at 6 in the morning. The guide hoped to reach Allahabad by evening. In that case, Mr. Fogg would only lose a part of the 48 hours saved since the beginning of the tour. Kyoini, resuming his rapid gait, soon descended the lower spurs of the Vindhyas, and towards noon they passed by the village of Kalanger on the Kani, and one of the branches of the Ganges. The guide avoided inhabited places, thinking it is safer to keep the open country which lies along the first depressions of the basin of the Great River. Allahabad was now only 12 miles to the northeast. They stopped under a clump of bananas, and the fruit of which, as healthy as bread and as succulent as cream, was amply taken off and pretzeled. Eh? At 2 o'clock, the guide entered a thick forest which extended several miles. He preferred to travel under cover of the woods. They had not as yet had they had not as yet had any unpleasant encounters, and the journey uh seemed on the point of being successfully accomplished when the elephant, becoming restless, suddenly stopped. It was then 4 o'clock. What's the matter? Asked Sir Francis, putting out his head. I don't know, officer, replied the Parsi, listening attentively to the confused murmur which came through the thick branches. The murmur soon became more distinct. It now seemed like a distant concert of human voices accompanied by brass instruments. Pasir Padak was all eyes and ears. Mr. Fogg patiently waited without a word. The Parsi jumped to the ground, fastened the elephant to the tree, and plunged into the thicket. He soon returned, saying, a procession of Brahmins is coming this way. We must prevent their singing us if possible. The guide unloosened the elephant and led him into a thicket, and at the same time asked the travellers not to stir. He held himself ready to bestride the animal at a moment's notice, should flight become necessary. But he evidently thought that the procession of the faithful would pass without perceiving there amid the thick foliage, in which they were wholly concealed. The discordant tones of the voices and instruments drew nearer, and now droning songs mingled with the sound of the tambourines and cymbals. The head of the procession soon appeared beneath the trees 100 paces away, and the strange figures who performed the religious ceremony were easily distinguished through the branches. First came the priests with mitres on their head and clothed in long lace robes. They were surrounded by men, women, and children, who sang a kind of lugubrious pas lu- lu- lugubrious psalm, interrupted at regular intervals by the tambourines and cymbals, while behind them was drawn a car with large wheels, the spokes of which represented serpents intertwined with each other. Upon the car, which was drawn by ca- four richly caparisoned zebras, stood a hideous statue with 4 arms, the body colour a dull red, with haggard eyes, dishevelled hair, protruding tongue, and lips tinted with betel. It stood upright upon the figure of a prostrate and headless giant. Sir Francis, recognizing the statue, whispered, the goddess Kali, the goddess of love and death. Of death, perhaps, muttered Passepartout, but of love, that ugly old hag, never. A group of old Fakirs were capering and making a wild ado around the statue. These were stripped with ochre and covered with cuts, whence their blood issued drop by drop. Stupid fanatics who, in the great Indian ceremony, still throw themselves under the wheels of the juggernaut. Some Brahmins, clad in all the sumptuousness of Oriental apparel, with, and leading a woman who faltered at every step, followed. The woman was young and as fair as a European. Her head and neck, shoulders, ears, arms, hands, and toes were loaded down with jewels and gemmed with bracelets, earrings, and rings, while the tunic bordered with gold and covered with a light muslin robe betrayed the outline of her form. The guards who followed the young woman presented a violent contrast to her, armed as they were with naked sabres hung at their waists, and long Damas- Damascene pistols, and bearing a corpse on a palanquin. It was the body of an old man, gorgeously arrayed in the habiliments of a Rajah, wearing, as in life, a turban embroidered with pearls, a robe of tissue of silk and gold, a scarf of cashmere sealed with diamonds, and the magnificent weapons of a Hindu prince. Next came the musicians and a rear guard of capering Fakirs, whose cries sometimes drowned the noise of the instruments. These closed the procession. Sir Francis watched the procession with a sad coun- countenance and, turning to the guide, said a sweetie. The Parsi nodded and put his fingers to his lips. The procession slowly wound under the trees, and soon its last ranks disappeared in the depth of the wood. The song gradually died away. Occasional cries were heard in the distance until at last all was silence again. Phileas Fogg had heard what Sir Francis said, and as soon as the procession had disappeared, asked, "What is a suttee?" "A suttee," returned the general, "is a human sacrifice, but a voluntary one. The woman you have just seen will be burned tomorrow at the dawn of day." "Oh, the scoundrels!" cried Passepartout, who could not repress his indignation. "And the corpse?" asked Mr. Fogg. "Is that of the prince, her husband," said the guide, "an independent Rajah of Bundelkund." "Is it possible," resumed Phileas Fogg, his voice betraying not the least emotion, "that these barbarous customs still exist in India, and that the English have been unable to put a stop to them?" "These sacrifices do not occur in the larger portion of India," replied Sir Francis. "But we have no power over these savage territories, and especially here in Bundelkund. The whole district north of the Vihandas is a theatre of incessant murder and pillage." "The poor wretch!" exclaimed Passepartout. "To be burned alive!" "Yes," returned Sir Francis, "burned alive. And, if she were not, you cannot conceive what treatment she would be obliged to submit to from her relatives. They would shave off her hair, feed her on a scanty allowance of rice, treat her with contempt. She would be looked upon as an unclean creature, and would die in some corner like a scurvy dog. The prospect of so frightful an existence drives these poor creatures to the sacrifice much more than love or religious fan- fanaticism. Sometimes, however, the sacrifice is really voluntary, and it requires the active interference of the government to prevent it. Several years ago, when I was living at Bombay, a young widow asked permission of the governor not to be burned along with her husband's body. But, as you may imagine, he refused. The woman left the town, took her refuge with an independent Rajah, and there carried out her self-devoted purpose. When Sir Francis was speaking, the guide shook his head several times, and now said, "The sacrifice which will take place tomorrow at dawn is not a voluntary one. How do you know?" "Everybody knows about this affair in Bundelkund." "But the wretched creature did not seem to be making any resistance," observed Sir Francis. "That was because they had intoxicated her with the fumes of hemp and opium. Where are they taking her?" "To the pagoda of Pillaji, 2 miles from here. She will pass the night there, and the sacrifice will take place tomorrow at the first light of dawn." The guide now led the elephant out of the thicket and leapt upon its neck. Just at the moment he was about to urge Coiny forward with a particular whistle, Mr. Fogg stopped him, and turned to Sir Francis Cortomary and said, "Suppose we save this woman." "Save the woman, Mr. Fogg." "I have yet 12 hours to spare. I can devote them to that." "Why, you are a man of heart." "Sometimes," replied Phileas Fogg quietly, "when I have the time." Chapter something. In which Passepartout receives a new proof that fortune favours the brave. The project was a bold one, full of difficulty, perhaps impractical. Mr. Fogg was going to risk his life, or at least liberty, and therefore the success of his tour. But he did not hesitate, and he found Sir Francis Cromarty an enthusiastic ally. As for Passepartout, he was ready for anything that might be proposed. His master's idea charmed him. He perceived a heart, a soul, under the icy exterior. He began to love Phileas Fogg. There remained the guide. What course would he adopt? Would he not take part with the Indians? In default of his assistance, it was necessary to be assured of his neutrality. Sir Francis frankly put the question to him. Officers, replied the guide, I am a Parsi, and this woman is a Parsi. Hmm? Yes, a Parsi. Command me as you will. Excellent, said Mr. Fogg. However, resumed the guide, it is certain not only that shall we risk our lives, but horrible tortures if we are taken. That is foreseen. I think we must wait till night before acting. I think so, said the guide. The worthy Indian then gave some account of the victim, who, he said, was a celebrated beauty of the Parsi race, and the daughter of a wealthy Bombay merchant. She had received a truly English education in that city, and, from her manners and intelligence, would be thought an European. Her name was Aouda. Left an orphan, she was married against her will to the old Raja of Pondokud, and, knowing the fate awaited her, she escaped, was retaken, and devoted by the Raja's relatives, who had an interest in her death, to the sacrifice from which it seemed she could not escape. The Parsi's narrative only confirmed Mr. Fogg and his companions in their generous design. It was decided that the guide should direct the elephant towards the pagoda of Pillaji, where he accordingly approached as quickly as possible. They halted half an hour afterwards in a copse, some 500 feet from the pagoda, where they were well concealed, but they could still hear the groans and cries of the fakirs distinctly. They then discovered the means of getting at the victim. The guide was familiar with the pagoda of Pillaji, in which, as he declared, the young woman was imprisoned. Could they enter any of its doors while the whole party of Indians was plunged in a drunken sleep, or was it safer to attempt to make a hole in the walls? This could only be determined at the moment and the place themselves, but it was certain that the abduction must be made that night, and not when, at break of day, the victim was led to a funeral pyre. Then no human intervention could save her. As soon as night fell, about 6 o'clock, they decided to make a reconnaissance around the pagoda. The cries of the fakirs were just ceasing. The Indians were in the act of plunging themselves into drunkenness caused by liquid opium mingled with hemp, and it might be possible to slip between them to the temple itself. The Parsi, leading the others, noiselessly crept through the wood, and in 10 minutes they found themselves on the banks of a small stream, whence, by the light of the rosin torches, they perceived a pile of wood, on top of which lay the emblemed body of the Raja, who was to be buried with his wife. The pagoda, whose minarets loomed above the trees in the deepening dusk, stood 100 steps away. Come, whispered the guide. He slipped more cautiously than ever through the brush, followed by his companions. The silence around was only broken by the low murmuring of the wind among the branches. Soon the Parsi stopped on the borders of the glade, which was lit up by the torches. The ground was covered by groups of Indians, motionless in their drunken sleep. It seemed a battlefield strewn with the dead. Men, women, and children lay together. In the background, among the trees, the pagoda of Bilajau loomed distinctly. Much to the guide's disappointment, the guards of the Raja, lighted by torches, were watching at the door and marching to and fro with naked sabres. Probably the priests, too, were watching within. The Parsi, now convinced that it was impossible to force an entrance to the temple, advanced no further, but led his companions back again. Phileas Fogg and Sir Francis Cromarty also saw that nothing could be attempted in that direction. They stopped and engaged in a whispered colloquy. It is only 8 now, said the brigadier, and these guards may also go to sleep. It is not impossible, returned the Parsi. They lay down at the foot of a tree and waited. The time seemed long. The guide ever and anon left them to take an observation on the edge of the wood, but the guards watched steadily by the glare of the torches, and the dim light crept through the windows of the pagoda. They waited till midnight, but no change took place among the guards, and it became apparent that their yielding to sleep could not be counted on. The other plan must be carried out. An opening in the walls of the pagoda must be made. It remained to ascertain whether the priests were watching by the side of the victim as assiduously as the soldiers at the door. After a last consultation, the guide announced that he was ready for the attempt and advanced, followed by the others. They took a roundabout way so as to get at the pagoda on the rear. They reached the walls about 12:30 without having met anyone there. Here there was no guard, nor were there either windows or doors. The night was dark. The moon on the wing scarcely left the horizon and was covered with heavy clouds. The height of the trees depended on the darkness. It was not enough to reach the walls, an opening in them must be accomplished, and to attain this purpose the party only had their pocket knives. Happily, the temple walls were built of brick and wood, which could be penetrated with little difficulty. After one brick had been taken out, the rest would yield easily. They set noiselessly to work, with the Parsi on one side and Passepartout on the other, began to loosen the bricks so as to make an aperture 2 feet wide. They were getting on rapidly when suddenly a cry was heard in the interior of the temple, followed almost instantly by other cries in replying from the outside. Passepartout and the guard stopped. Had they been heard, was the alarm being given? Common prudence urged them to retire, and they did so, followed by Phileas Fogg and Sir Francis. They again hid themselves in the wood, and waited till the disturbance, whatever it might be, ceased, holding themselves ready to resume their attempt without delay. But, awkwardly enough, the guards now appeared at the rear of the temple, and there installed themselves in readiness to prevent the surprise. It would be difficult to describe the disappointment of the party, thus interrupted in their work. They could not now reach the victim. How then could they save her? Sir Francis shook his fist, and Passepartout was beside himself, and the guide gnashed his teeth with rage. The tranquil Fogg waited, without betraying any emotion. "You have nothing to do but to go away," whispered Sir Francis. "Nothing but to go away," echoed the guide. "Stop! I am only due at Allahabad tomorrow before noon." "But what can you hope to do?" asked Sir Francis. "In a few hours it will be daylight, and the chance which now may seems lost may present itself at the last moment." Sir Francis would have liked to read Phileas Fogg's eyes. What was this cool Englishman thinking of? Was he planning to make a rush for the young woman at the very moment of the sacrifice, and boldly snatch her from her executioners? This would be utter folly, and it was hard to admit that Fogg was such a fool. Hmm?
I think we want this one to
Okay. The guide led them to the rear of the glade, where they were able to observe the sleeping groups. Meanwhile, Passepartout, who had perched himself on the lower branches of a tree, was resolving an idea which had first struck him like a flash, which was now firmly lodged in his brain. I finish the chapter, or I just stop?
I think you just finish this page and you just
No. Okay. He had commenced by saying to himself, "What folly!" and then he repeated, "Why not, after all? It's a chance, perhaps only one, and with such sorts." Thinking thus, he slipped, and with the suppleness of a serpent, to the lowest branches, at ends of which bent almost to the ground. The hours passed, and the lighter shades now announced the approach of day, though it was not yet light. This was the moment. The slumbering multitude became animated, the tambourine sounded, songs and cries arose, the hour of sacrifice had come. The doors of the pagoda swung open, and a bright light escaped from its interior, in the midst of which Mr. Fogg and Sir Francis espied the victim. She seemed, having shaken off the stupor of intoxication, to be striving to escape from her executioner. Sir Francis' heart throbbed, and, convulsively seizing Mr. Fogg's hand, found it in an open knife. Just at this moment, the crowd began to move. The young woman had fallen again into a stupor caused by the fumes of hemp, and passed among the Faquirs, who escorted her with their wild religious cries. Phileas Fogg and his companions, mingling in the rear ranks of the crowd, followed, and in 2 minutes they reached the banks of the stream, and stopped 50 paces from the pyre, upon which still lay the Rajah's corpse. In the semi-obscurity they saw the victim, quite senseless, stretched out beside her husband's body. Then a torch was brought out, and the wood, heavily soaked with oil, instantly took fire. Okay.
No, thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Someone else will probably read the rest of this. Yeah, bye bye.
See you guys next time.
This one's 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a live at 5. You can go watch that later. 5:30. Okay, it's a live at 5:30. You can go watch that later. Yeah, okay, bye bye.